Thank you everyone for registering today for this month's R-ship series on avoiding higher education burnout. Please join me in welcoming Victor Moreira, who will discuss the potential consequences of experiencing mild to severe burnout and provide us with everyday practices that we can do to avoid it. Victor, we're ready to listen.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. All right, cool. We're gonna get started. So yes, my talk or presentation today is on avoiding higher ed burnout. Um, Before I get started, I want to give a quick background on who I am for those that don't know. So again, my name is Victor Moreira. I am UC Riverside's inaugural Black Student Success Coordinator. I've been in this role um, for over a year. So as of January, I've been in this position, but I've been on campus for over a decade. So I spent about 7.5 years advising in CHAS as a major advisor. And then I spent another 2.5 years prior in CNAS serving as a major advisor there. I'm also a UCR alum, class of 2007. Went to the University of Redlands for my master's, and a few of us did the same program at different times. I'm also the chair of our Black Faculty and Staff Association, and I'm also a founding member of our uh, Black Alumni chapter. And as far as being the chair of our Black Faculty and Staff Association, I'm going into my third consecutive term. So just overall, between being a student and what I've done professionally and volunteer wise, I've literally been connected to UCR for over half my life. So UCR is definitely home. So we are here today to talk about higher ed burnout because it's real, right? We've seen it all at this point. Either we've experienced it to a certain extent, or we've seen burnout happen to somebody that we know. And even if we haven't experienced it, the threat of higher ed burnout is just always part of our reality as professionals. I like to almost compare it to being chased by Jason or Michael Myers. Doesn't matter how quickly you run, they're like always a couple of steps behind you. And that's kind of how I feel about higher ed burnout. It's a reality that we all have, regardless of how well we think we're doing. If we're not careful, right, we can stumble, we can fall, and before you know it, it's on top of us. We're also here because we're committed to doing everything in our power to fend off higher ed burnout. We are not part of the sort of previous regime to where we don't care about our professional wellness, right? It is a priority, and we're not going to take it lightly. Um, Again, we've seen what happened in the past, and folks that kind of just put up with it and what that led to down the road. So again, we're committed to our wellness professionally. So I want to briefly define higher ed burnout. And I adopted this definition from the definition of advisor burnout that I got from NACADA a couple of years ago. And simply put, when we talk about higher ed burnout, it's the inability of an advisor, or in our case, any higher ed professional, to cope with the stressors of the job that lead to emotional exhaustion, detachment from students, or in this case, faculty, staff, and others, and developing feelings of professional incompetence. So you no longer feel like you can do the job, right? You're punching from behind. You feel like I just can't cope. I can't hang. I'm struggling. I'm drowning, or I'm underwater trying to fight. And it's just not a good feeling. So when we talk about the outcomes of higher ed burnout, there's a few, but there's two that I want to focus on at least. You could potentially get to a position where you're like, hey, I want to leave. I'm going to leave my position, or potentially I may even want to leave the profession, right? Which is unfortunate because you chose the profession, you chose your position for a reason. But when you get to that point to where you're burned out, you may say, hey, I need to leave, right? If you haven't met anybody who has left because they got burned out, then you probably haven't been in higher ed long enough. but it happens every day. It happens every week. Or the second outcome, or at least the second that I want to focus on, is that the individual who's burned out turns into a professional that they never thought they would become. And it could be temporary or it could be permanent. And by that, I mean, you turn into this sort of professional that's apathetic, um, limited patience, angry, dismissive. You turn into a version of yourself that you never thought you would become. And maybe it's, again, temporarily, or maybe it's just kind of who you become. Again, if you are in higher ed for long enough, you've seen it happen. Hey, why are they even here? It seems like they don't like to be around others. They don't like students. They don't like working with staff or whatever. Why are they here? Well, they probably weren't always that way. So you guys have my permission. If you ever see me turn into someone who's apathetic or limited, impatient, or dismissive or angry, please let me know, right? Because I can promise you right now that was never my intent, and I definitely need to get some help, right? Because again, why would I be here if that was the case? When we talk about what leads to higher ed burnout, again, there's a lot of different reasons as to why. One of the more common ones could potentially be prolonged staffing issues, and that's not entirely in your control. So where you're doing, half of somebody else's job or another job over an extended amount of time, or new responsibilities get put onto your plate. Again, that's not entirely in our control. But what is ineffective time and energy management practices, right? That is in our control. If we don't properly look at what we're doing, right, we can be setting ourselves up for failure as it relates to, again, higher ed burnout. The main takeaway point that I have, so if you forget my name, you forget everything else that I covered, the main takeaway point for today is effective time and energy management practices help us stay away from higher ed burnout, right? We're doing our part. The challenges and stressors of higher ed are going to happen. It's like getting a flat tire. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. Like that's almost kind of par for the course, right? But those who kind of manage to kind of weather that storm are ones that typically engage in effective time and energy management practices on a daily basis. So what I'm going to share 8 different time and energy management practices that I actively use every day to help me avoid higher ed burnout, right? And they're not ordered from least to greatest. They're kind of all equally as important. And I picked these up over the years through watching pretty much the professionals I've been around in higher ed, and actually having conversations with them, as well as folks who are not in higher ed, but they're in industries and professions that kind of have the same type of challenges as far as burnout always being kind of around the corner. And just through trial and error, right? Just making mistakes, and figuring out how to do things on accident, to be honest with you. Um, the practices aren't grand and sexy. They're not over the top. They're very practical, everyday practices that we can do that save small amounts of time and energy that add up over time. Because when you get to a point where you're burned out, it's typically over a duration of a period of time, right? To where you've been struggling slowly. It's a very gradual, almost like a weathering type of effect, right? So again, these practices are really designed to help you save time and energy that adds up in the long run. Um, so as far as when I'm done sharing, I left enough time for us to kind of talk about what we do in our own everyday um, practice that helps us stay away from a higher ed burnout. Because again, this is how we learn. So keep that in mind as well. But as far as practice number 1, let's get into it. So Save your most challenging and draining aspects of your job for your superhuman periods. Let me discuss what I mean by superhuman. I believe that we all have periods in the day to where we are most locked in. Maybe it's one period, maybe it's multiple, right? Why? This depends on you. I know for me, from 8 to 9:30, man, I am unstoppable, right? Same thing from 1 to 2. Now, it doesn't mean that after 9:30, excuse me, that I'm useless, right? It just means that during those periods, I am super locked in, right? Folks are still trickling into the office. My energy is extremely high. But again, that's for me. For you, it might be different. But the point behind it is that if you can save the parts of your job that are just extremely physically and mentally draining for these periods, you are more than likely going to get through right that task quicker and without excessive amount of energy. And the example I want to give goes back to my days in advising, where we had to clear graduation applications. And each application can potentially take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you may have over 100 to clear in a certain amount of time. And every last little detail on a student's record had to be in order. Every little I had to be dotted. And what I was doing in the past was I was blocking off entire days to work on grad apps. And I would just be just sledging along, right? Just losing focus, trying to stay focused. But one year I said, hey, what if I just did my grad apps over the course of a period of time in the morning from 8 to 9:30? And I realized that I got through my grad apps in significantly less time, right? With significantly less energy because I was just locked in, right? So again, you have periods to where you are superhuman, where you are extremely locked in, right? Identify when those periods are. And again, and try to save the most challenging, draining aspects of your job for those periods. Um, Moving forward, avoid having the long, drawn out conversations via email. Um, Sometimes we can't, I get it, right? But for the most part, if we can, let's avoid them. My belief is that emails are kind of for short, quick exchanges. If it's going to take me more than a paragraph, I'm like, I don't know. We got to find another medium to talk, right? Because again, to me, they're for short, quicker exchanges. Um, the time that you spend going back and forth with replying and reading and doing all of those things, it adds up in the long run. And what ends up happening is conversations can get messy, right? When you're talking about more than one thing, keeping track of everything. This person forgot to be CC'd on it, even though they're on the previous email. Again, it kind of gets all over the place, right? Especially if you're dealing with students where there's multiple conversations taking place. It just really gets hard to stay on top of everything, right? Then the time between interactions, if there's an important deadline coming up, again, it can get messy extremely quickly. And what ends up happening in a lot of cases is we get frustrated and we say, hey, let's just talk anyways. Let's find a time to talk. And now we have to kind of review everything we talked about before, leading up to where we left off. The world knows about Zoom now. Everybody knows about Zoom, right? If my mother knows how to use Zoom, I'm pretty confident in saying that the rest of the world knows how to use Zoom as well. And for me, I'd rather hop on a quick 10-minute call, 15-minute call, or hey, let's talk tomorrow from at 4 or whatever, and discuss whatever it is we need to discuss, right? Or telephone, whatever you want to use, right? Just to have that live interaction, especially if there's multiple things that you kind of want to discuss, right? It just makes life a whole lot easier. Of course, you still need to CYA, cover your ASS. So you can send a recap email when you're done. Hey, just following up from our conversation. Did I miss anything? Hey, take a look. Do we need to add anything? Just to recap what was discussed. But you've saved yourself so much time. I'd rather allocate more time to having availability to talk with folks via phone, telephone, or in person than I would with answering emails, right? Just because, again, it's a more effective use of my time personally. Number three, update your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar management system you use with as much detail as possible. It's one thing to know that you're busy. It's one thing to feel that you're busy, but I think you need to visibly see how busy you are on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, right? And it's not so much for other people to see. I mean, you can, as you guys know, put things to private so other people can't see it. This is more so for yourself so that you can visibly see, I have a lot going on this week. Wow, I have to come in on Saturday. Wow, I'm staying late, or I'm answering emails on the weekend. It just helps you kind of see how busy you are day to day, week to week. So if you know you have a busy week, next week, maybe I'm going to tone it back a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to lessen the meetings. I've been running around campus, running from meeting to meeting. I'm going to scale it back this week. Or this week was light. All right, next week I can kind of pile it on a little bit more. But either way, you just have better management, right? And again, if you're answering emails on the weekend, put it on there, right? Obviously, there's conversations on not doing that, but I know for a lot of us, we do. So if you're even working on the weekends, me personally, put it on the calendar. If you're routinely staying past your normal hours, put it on the calendar, right? Um, these hours add up and you need to visibly see that. I think it hits different, as opposed to knowing you're busy, and feeling that you're busy, but you can physically see how busy you are. Practice four is kind of related. Um, Stop working during your lunch. It's your time. I know we have a habit of, hey, let me get some food really quick and answer some emails, because I don't want to fall behind, right? But your lunch is your time. That midday mental and physical break is what you need to recharge. In order for you to not fall behind, in order for you to not get get off task, you have to recharge, right? And so it's almost like I need to slow down so I can finish, as opposed to not slowing down in fear of not finishing, right? Take that recharge. How many of us are working during our lunch, and giving free hours to the university, right? How many of us are routinely staying past our normal work hours, or working on the weekends, again, giving the university, giving the UC system free work, free labor, right? Your lunch is your time. Last week, my office felt like the DMV. It was extremely crazy. There were students everywhere. Like, in my 10 years being here, I've never been that packed before. But at 12 o'clock, I still closed my door, took my lunch, took a mental and physical break, right? So whether it means reading a book, listening to a podcast, take that mental break, because it helps me finish the day. It helps me avoid not getting off track and getting behind, because I need the energy to do so. Um, if you want to volunteer, right, for different staff affinity groups, staff assembly, other groups unofficially, um, you are in your right to do so. UCOP says we can. The president says we can, right? There's letters, there's documentation saying we can. You don't have to use your lunch break to do those types of things. Yes, we often have lunchtime meetings because logistically it's easier, right? Because people kind of have different workflows and schedules. But at the end of the day, you are not required or mandated to use your lunch hour to do so. Again, and this is a UC wide thing, right? I sit on a lot of committees that are UC wide, and this conversation probably comes up the most, right? You are allowed to volunteer and give back to the community, the UC community, without having to use your lunchtime. If you want to meet with another UCR employee or UC employee for professional development purposes, right? Hey, I want to learn more about how I can move up, or how do I manage certain issues, or just certain, how do I maximize certain opportunities, and other stuff that we talk about via professional development. You don't have to take your lunch to do all that, right? So if I want to meet with a staff member because I want to learn more about what they do and how I can, maneuver, right? Again, it doesn't have to be, oh, we got to do it from 12 to 1. Okay, let's meet at 9 to 10 at Coffee Bean, or again, 10 to 11 or whatever, right? Of course, you talk to your leadership, you talk to your supervisor, but again, um, you are in your right to engage in professional development um, outside of your lunch hours. And lastly, if you're taking a 30-minute lunch, I strongly consider you to take the hour lunch. The idea of scarfing down your food in 30 minutes, not getting enough time just to kind of take a mental break, maybe take a quick cat nap or whatever you need to do. I get it. You don't want to fall behind, right? But again, resting so that you can stay on top of it is kind of the smarter move to make. Now, obviously, there's childcare reasons and other reasons why people work at 30. That's different. But if you're doing it because you feel like, hey, I'm better suited that way, I would encourage you to kind of reconsider that. And I've done both, right? And I realized that the 30-minute lunch break, yeah, that's not a smart move. I need to just kind of let go for at least an hour. Uh, Moving forward, practice number 5: take vacation days that are just for rest. So we all know the saying, I need a vacation from my vacation, right? Going overseas or hanging out with family or doing this and that. It's fun. Don't get me wrong, but it's also exhausting. The travel time, not sleeping in your own bed, the difference in weather, those things add up. I was just at Disneyland a couple of weeks ago. I needed a day to recover, right? Toontown and Main Street, that's kind of a distance, right? And just walking around the park and doing all that fun stuff. And we had the park hopper. Let's go to California Adventure, and do all of this, right? Um, you need those vacation days as well for rest. Um, Using a vacation time and not getting any rest out of it can be dangerous because that's what it's for. I have a friend who doesn't work in higher ed, but every year she takes a big trip overseas, right? A lot of us, for example, will save up our vacation to take that one big trip. And the way she does it, let's say she takes 8 days off. Her return will be on the 6th day because she'll give herself 2 days to literally rest, to recharge and rest. So she's not, landing from LAX Sunday night and coming into work Monday morning, extremely tired, jet lagged, and whatnot, right? Because you use this vacation time that you earned and you got no rest out of it. It's okay to take a random day, right? I'm gonna take this Wednesday to kind of recharge. Sometimes the weekend is not enough, especially for our parents and folks who are just engaged. We know that the weekend can be just as busy, if not more, right? When you start talking about all the other obligations you have. So sometimes the weekend isn't even enough time to kind of recharge. So again, use your vacation days, not just for fun, but for pure, boring rest. I'm not doing anything but just catching up on sleep or doing whatever I need to do to recharge. Number 6, stop doing the little things for other professionals. Um, I can more than likely, I've been around for a while. Most of us are on a weekly basis, maybe even on a daily basis, doing small things that aren't necessarily part of our responsibility, but we do it for different reasons. Maybe we don't want to make anybody mad. Maybe we want things to kind of go over smoothly, and then there's no issues, there's no drama. But at the end of the day, those hours add up at your expense, right? They add up at your expense. I want to give you guys an example. So I obviously I'm student facing. So there's so many different resources that get sent to me in my office to share to students, sometimes even to faculty and staff. right? I mean, every day we get 5 to 10, hey, can this be shared? Can this be shared? And I'll get stuff that's not formatted correctly. Like, you've told me what your opportunity is, but I'm not, it's not my job to put your message in in words that our students can kind of digest. If you want this message forwarded to a certain population, then give me something that can be forwarded. It's different. There's a difference between, hey, can you help me craft a message versus can you send this? Okay, give me something that can be sent, right? Can you work on this? Hey, I have no problem doing this. Can you word this in a way in which I can, where you're addressing the students or staff directly so I can simply forward it? You've told me what you want to convey to them, but again, it's not in a format that is ready to be conveyed, aka forwarded or email blasted. Um, or even with, hey, this is going to the students, you should probably create a flyer for it, right? They're more than likely going to digest what you want them to see in a flyer form. So by all means, get that done, and I can help you out and forward it. I'm not going to do it for you. I was doing that in the past. And what ended up happening is I realized that every week I was spending an hour every week pretty much um doing formatting, taking somebody else's message and putting it in a way in which it would be consumable to whoever they wanted the message to go to. So over the course of a quarter, 10 weeks, I was spending a full day and some change simply forwarding or helping other people craft their message. This is what I mean by the little stuff adds up. 10 minutes, 20, 30, 40 minutes. These add up over the course of a quarter, a year, a career, a full day. If somebody said, hey, you're going to spend a full day simply uh, recreating somebody else's message, you're probably going to say, you must be crazy. I'm not doing that, right? It's not an effective use of my time. So again, um, stop doing the little things for other professionals. It's one thing if they ask you, right? It's one thing if it's an emergency. Obviously, there's case by case scenarios, but stop. And you'd be surprised how many people would say, hey, not a problem. I think sometimes we don't want to offend anybody. But I know in most cases where I'm like, hey, can you reword this or can you put this in a flyer? They'll say, hey, not a problem. And they'll get back to me. Number 7, practice 7. Engage in practices that remind you of why you're in your profession and or at UCR. We're not here solely for the money, or at least most of us. Quite frankly, we have other options as well, right? So there's a reason why we chose to be here and potentially stay here. What is that, right? Don't forget to engage in the activities or the people or the places that remind you of why you're here, right? That's super important because you're going to have your moments, you're going to have your periods, but we need to reconnect, right? Are you here because of the students, the diversity, the campus culture, right? Why are you here? And what helps you uh, remember that? Um, for me personally, um, I in the past like going to our campus's Black graduation. It has a certain energy that um, can't be duplicated, right? Um, it's a certain energy feel. You see these students changing um, their family's narrative, and it's a certain energy that really motivates you. Um, and I forgot about that for a couple of years between the pandemic and a lot of stuff going on. I had forgotten about how much I enjoy that and how much it recharges me, oftentimes from year to year. And in 2022, I was at a place to where I was considering leaving the profession, leaving UCR, because I kind of fell out of love with what was going on and what I was doing, especially with the pandemic being out for almost 2 years, things being kind of weird when we slowly came back. Obviously, it wasn't the same. I think I need something else. But I went to the Black graduation in 2022, and that connected me in such a way that it led me to my current position, right? So literally reconnecting with what I love about UCR kept me here, right? Yes, there's going to be a lot of BS that we have to deal with, but there has to be some things that keep you here, right? So, what are the things that remind you of why you're here? Again, don't forget about that. Make time for that, right? Practice number 8. Um, if your professional plate is getting heavy, do something about it, right? Burnout doesn't kind of appear overnight. Again, it's a slow, gradual thing. You can start to feel it, right? It almost reminds me when I was a kid in the pool and I would kind of venture towards the deep end, and it kind of felt like, okay, I kind of need to get my way back to the shallow end. It's feeling kind of weird, right? My feet, I can't, my feet aren't touching the ground like they are. I'm kind of bouncing up and down. Yeah, let me not kid myself here. Um, when you get to those points, do something about it. Don't suffer in silence, right? Even the best supervisors and managers and leaders and directors are not mind readers, right? They're not going to automatically know what's going on. And I get it, right? There's a fear of, I don't want people to think I can't handle my responsibilities, right? But we all know that a lot of us are doing stuff beyond the scope of our position. And I would say that a lot of us are probably kind of scared to even look at what our job description actually is, because we'll probably see so much that's on there that I'm not supposed to be doing this, right? Um, but at the end of the day, this is your well-being, right? Um, versus the fear of what you think, right? They might say, oh, they can't handle it. They can't. That's not entirely true at all, right? A lot of us are asked to be doing a lot. And we know that we've been asked to do a lot. Um, Start off with somebody that you can trust. If you don't have a professional mentor, I suggest you find one. For those that have been around, right, I highly suggest doing the Highlander Mentor Connect program. I did it for the first time. It was an amazing experience. Um, but talk to somebody that you can trust. Develop some type of game plan. How do I want to approach this? Right. But I feel myself drowning. I feel the burnout coming on. I feel myself getting agitated and losing patience, and the small things making me mad or angry in ways in which it didn't do before. Again, reach out and talk to somebody, develop a game plan, right? You're not the only one um, that might feel a certain way, right? Um, I'm always here, right? If you're here, then you could always call on me. I've been fortunate myself to have my fair share of mentors at UC Riverside and outside of UC Riverside that I can come talk to, right? If I feel like, oh, things are getting kind of heavy or things are kind of getting messy and I'm just really feeling it. Um, I'm punching from behind here. I don't feel like I'm staying on top of it. Um, because ultimately, if you are at that point to where you're burned out, the scary part is it might spill into other areas of your life, right? Um, I've seen it happen here at Riverside. I've literally seen people get burned out, and it has fundamentally changed who they are, not just professionally, but as people. So who you are as a sibling, a spouse, a friend, a community member. I've seen it happen, right? In ways in which, when I can tell you honestly, I've shed a few tears over the years from what I've seen. So again, this is your well-being, this is your livelihood, right? So talk to somebody about it. Don't sit there in silence. What I want to do now, like I said, I wanted to leave enough time for folks to share any questions or comments they had, and also even share some of the things that they do, right, in their own everyday practice that we can all learn from. But of course, if you have any questions or concerns, go ahead and share that. But again, I just wanted to save some time and open up the floor for anybody who had any questions, comments, and concerns. Again, thank you. Hopefully this helps. I told you they weren't going to be big and sexy. They were just going to be low key, everyday stuff we could do. I guess the easiest way to do it is mute yourself or the host. How do we want to do it?
Thank you, Victor. This was a great presentation. Looks like Krenza, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. Victor, thanks for these suggestions. This is really, really great. I love practical everyday suggestions. When you get to a point where your calendar is showing you that you're that full and that busy, what are some of the things that you then do, or what are some of the actions you take to correct course or move forward?
That's a good question. If it's crazy, I may try to reschedule. If it's in person, I may say, can we meet via Zoom? If I don't need to be there, and let's say other folks on my team will be there, I may say, hey, I'm going to sit this one out. I'll catch up with you to figure out what I missed. I get meetings rescheduled all the time. It doesn't bother me because I get it. People are trying to manage their time. So if you need to reschedule a meeting, by all means, reschedule. I don't think anybody's going to be offended by that in higher ed, because we all know that we are one email or phone call away from our whole situation changing. So that's how I play it when it happens. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Krenza. It looks like there's a question in the chat. When will the Highlander mentor connection be open again?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I got invited to participate. Is there anybody that's connected? Oh, okay, I think Brittany has her hand up.
Yes, I do. So typically that program opens up for applications starting in November. And then we kind of go through those applications to match everybody, and the program actually starts, I do believe, come February. So applications will be coming soon. To those of you who are already on our lead listserv, you'll get emails reminding you about it.
And for those of us that have been around, please, please, please sign up. Just being part of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, I've seen so many new Highlanders come to campus, man, and they need it for sure.
Looks like they also want to how does someone get on that listserv? Is there someone who can answer that question?
We'll have your emails from the registration. So if you want to go ahead and be added to the listserv, just let us know in the chat and we'll make sure to add you on.
Thank you. Kathy, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, it's more of like a validation of what Victor said. One of the, the things that we do as part of our job that we've been doing that bring us both joy and the work, it's professional activities, but they bring value to our work, and it's easy for them to get squeezed out. And I just recommend that people make those part of their goals for the year, get their supervisor to support them to do those things. It might be going to a certain graduation ceremony or volunteering at commencement, because it lifts you up and it reminds you of why we do the work we do. But adding it to your goals for the year validates that you're supposed to do that thing, because otherwise your job will squeeze out the things that you wanted to do. And it's hard even for somebody like me to fight for those things, but I do. I fight for some things every year that are my things that I care about. because it's important for us to feel the good in what we do.
Thank you, Kathy, for that. Are there any other questions or comments that we'd like to share? Okay, well, it looks like this recording will we'll share a link to this recording. And if you have any feedback or if you have questions regarding the R-ship lead series, please feel free to email us as well.
Thanks. And everybody, again, I'm here as a resource. I'm putting myself out there. So if you ever need to talk, come holler at me. We can get some coffee outside of your lunch hour.
Thank you so much, Victor. Have a great day, everyone.